Hello again, this is Victor James, author of the Megacosm, and recently I had a brief discussion on Bleeding Full. That's the pop culture site that I write for, about the merits of Brian Michael Bendis and his Avengers Disassembled run. I mean, I loved it. It was like kind of an old school comic book discussion. So the basis of that discussion was that the beginning of the end for the classic Marvel, or was it fine for its time, which is where I stood? And that discussion got me thinking, what other comic book runs do I like that most people don't? And the first name that came to my mind was Judd Winick. First off, I get why people do not like Judd's comic book run. I absolutely cannot stand the current run of comic books that are going for the big two right now, and I have written many articles about the demise of the industry, which I believe actually should die so it could be reborn by people who actually like comics and heroes. So I completely understand why people do not like Judd Winick's comic book run, because he was on the forefront of adding modern day slop into comics, which has ruined the big two today. But before we judge too harshly, just a quick backstory on Judd Winick. I first heard of Judd when he was a participant of the Real World San Francisco. So first off, I want to apologize to millennials and Gen Z for my shame in watching reality TV. But back in 1994, reality TV was fresh and new, and I personally thought it was just a gimmick that wouldn't last. I had no idea at the time it would spread like a cancer and take over television. That season of The Real World was basically built around this gay activist called Pedro Zamora, who pretty much mainstreamed AIDS by fighting the disease while also fighting with TV's bad boy Puck. It was just days after The Real World actually aired that Pedro would die from his disease, and this obviously had a profound effect on Judd, who was close friends with Pedro on the show and constantly coming to his defense. But to be honest, when I was watching The Real World, Judd stood out to me because he was that nerd always talking about comics all the time. So I was shocked when I walked into my local comic book store years later and saw that he actually made it to the mainstream industry. Remember, this was before the internet was really big, so you actually were surprised by such things. But what didn't surprise me is that when Judd brought that emotional loss he felt from Pedro's death into his comics. In DC Comics Green Lantern 154, he made an assistant to Green Lantern gay, which was rare back in those days compared to now, when pretty much every character seems gay in comics. Then later during his run on Green Arrow in issue number 43, he made Speedy HIV positive, which gained mainstream media attention. So I get why people look back on Judd's run and feel like he was part of that modern day slop we are getting now, and I agree. Judd and I have wildly different political views, and there's probably isn't much we agree on, but I can personally separate the artist from the art. So to me, Judd is just a San Francisco liberal who acts just like a San Francisco liberal. But that doesn't mean he doesn't have some gems that stood out when he wrote for DC Comics. Now I've already mentioned his run on Green Lantern and Green Arrow, but it was his run on Outsiders that actually made that team interesting to me. And Judd actually took some slings from his own political side as well because, let's just say he enjoys good-looking characters. I remember at the time he received a lot of pushback for his depiction of the Titan women. And this was back in '08, so Judd might actually have been one of the first to face cancellation before it became mainstream. But most people know Judd from his Batman storyline Under the Red Hood, which has its own controversy because he brought back Jason Todd from the dead. Now, Jason Todd was one of the all-time iconic murders by the hand of the Joker, and this retconning of his death felt like a travesty to most comic book readers. But was it really bad? Sure, like most comic book readers, I hate that deaths have become meaningless in comics, but the genie is already out of the bottle. So I have to ask myself, did Judd Winick at least bring Jason Todd back the right way? And honestly, my answer is yes, and here's why. Instead of some silly throwaway storyline where it's just about the gimmick of Jason Todd coming back, Judd Winick actually tapped into the emotions of Batman would feel seeing Jason Todd alive, and Jason Todd's appropriate rage at Batman for his inaction after his murder. And Judd actually gets heroes and villains. Now hear me out, in Judd's Batman run, there is a clear bifurcation of the two. For example, like Mr. Freeze is a major player in the storyline, working for the Black Mask, and he's a barely controllable psychopath. Actually, this was probably the best version of Mr. Freeze I've read. And I love seeing heroes worry when they have to face someone like Deathstroke, who makes an appearance during this run. And honestly, he made Jason Todd pretty cool, at least to me. Jason had a plan and he used an additional training from the League of Assassins to start a gang war in Gotham and lead Batman to him to set up the climax. Under the Red Hood really was a good story with plenty of action that crescendoed into this thrilling ending. And like I said before, I like that Judd gave Batman humanity. When Nightwing shows up to lend a hand, you actually hear a joke from Batman and see him smile and being proud of Nightwing as they work together again. I just like seeing the side of Batman, who's not always this genius level detective thinking one step ahead of everyone. And Batman is obviously caught off guard by the real return of Jason Todd, since the villain had tried to trick him using this device before. Jason Todd ensured that Batman knew he was the real deal, and we get that real thrust of Jason Todd's plan, which is to kill Joker. And here's where I think Judd nailed this story. Spoilers ahead for those who haven't read the comic or seen the animated movie, but Jason Todd eventually drops the tough guy act and is genuinely hurt that Batman has allowed the Joker to live. And I love this because it's something I had never thought of before. I mean, why wouldn't Jason Todd be very angry that Batman has allowed this murdering psychopath to not only beat him up with a tire iron and then blow him up, but allow that same madman to continue killing people years afterwards? It's only human nature to think that your brutal murder would drive your father figure over the edge to finally take out that serial killer once and for all. I mean, I can only imagine Jason Todd coming back and seeing all the death and destruction the Joker has wrought since his murder, only to see Batman send him back to the same asylum he escapes from again and again and again. But here's where Judd nails it again, because Batman explains why he doesn't kill the Joker. And this is why I say Judd understands heroes, because Batman explains that he can't become like the villains he fights against. It would be too easy for Batman to become like them, and it becomes easier the next time. And when Jason Todd puts him in an impossible situation to kill him or the Joker, Judd actually figures out a third way for Batman that doesn't kill either. So overall, I get it. Judd Winick's DC run was hit or miss. I like his Titans, I liked his Outsiders, and I loved his Batman run. Yes, Jason coming back by Superboy punching a reality wall is a pretty stupid idea, but Judd was just using what was popular at the time. Would I rather Jason Todd still be dead? Yes. I wish deaths were more permanent in comics because comics were just more interesting when they were. But if you're going to bring someone back, then I don't mind the way Judd Winick utilized the Crisis storyline to do it. But you let me know in the comments below. I know this is a controversial position to take, and that the consensus is Judd is a terrible writer, he's woke, and he uses gimmicks in the storyline to gain headlines. But I happen to disagree with the mainstream opinion on this. I think Judd has some, pretty good gems in his run. But you let me know what you think. So I want to remind you about my first novel, Fiasco Adventures, that's available on Amazon. It's actually available anywhere books are sold, but people like to buy from Amazon. I also have a Kindle version available where you can get it on Amazon for $9.99. And I want to remind you about my website, themegacosm.com, where I actually have my shop where you could buy it from me directly at a discount. And there's also a short story I wanted to remind you about that's available for 99 cents. It's actually selling very well these days. People are liking this story, so go ahead and pick it up. Also on my website, you can read short stories for free. For these short stories, Liquid Bank, Carry On the Cleaner, and the book, these are available for free. They're all complete. Just go ahead and read them for free. And if you're interested, you can read the first chapter of Fiasco Adventures for free, just to see if it's something that you actually want to purchase. And if my website's not your thing, go ahead and go to my Substack, where you can read pretty much the same stories on my Substack. But my website, I'm actually going to be releasing a book called The Nariko Meme pretty soon, and all my available information is going to be on my website. So go ahead and sign up to my website. You can get that information before anyone else. But that's all I want to say about this. God bless you and keep you. That's it, I'm done.